Okay, we're going to start. Now I know why the treasurer's here. He's here to testify on a bill. I thought he was just coming to hang out and watch us in action. But so we're going to start with that bill, and then we'll go to the departmental bills from Ag and MDE, et cetera. So we're going to start at Senator Brooks with Senate Bill 315, and you've got three panelists. And you've got some heavy hitters here. We've got Secretary Flora signed up. Why don't you come on up here on the panel? We've got Treasurer Davis. And finally, we've got Charles Glass. Those are the three witnesses on this bill, and they're all signed up favorable. So, Senator Brooks, you take all the time you need to present Senate Bill 315.
Thanks, Chair. Vice Chair Kagan and members of my awesome committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on SB 315, that's the Maryland Environmental Service Membership Board of Directors alterations. The purpose of this bill is to change the composition of the Maryland Environmental Services, that's MES, Board of Directors by removing the State Treasurer and replacing the role with the Secretary of the Maryland Department of Planning. This small change would lighten the burden on the State Treasurer's duties and responsibilities, plus ensure that the Board of Directors continue to operate smoothly. In 2021, the legislature passed the MES Reformed Act, which kept MES's independent status, but reformed its governance structure into what it is today, a seven-member Board of Directors, which is confirmed by the Senate. The governance reform has also added the State Treasurer to the MES Board of Directors. The board holds primarily responsibility for governance and the approval of contracts during the MES monthly meetings. The Office of the State Treasurer, despite its limited staff, took over the massive task of managing the Maryland 529 College Savings Plan. The addition of this responsibility led to several challenges pertaining to the number of board and commissions the State Treasurer is expected to act on. In 2024 session, the legislature successfully passed a bill to remove the office of the State Treasurer from 4 boards and commissions. Despite this adjustment, the bill kept the State Treasurer on the MES board, prompting need for this alteration. SB 315 would allow the Secretary of Planning or their designee to replace the State Treasurer under the same provision in which the Treasurer currently serves, specifically exempting the Secretary of Planning and the Executive Director from staggering to a 4-year and or allowing them to serve as an executive officer on the board. In order for the MES to maintain continuity in protecting the environment and improving the quality of Maryland's air, land, and water, it is imperative that the Board of Directors function well. All parties involved, including the Governor, State Treasurer, and Planning Secretary, are supportive of this transition. SB 315 aims to ensure that the Maryland Environmental Service Board of Directors operates efficiently to promote the health and well-being of our environment. For that reason, I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 315.
Okay, let's go to the three panelists, and then we'll take any questions. Mr. Treasurer, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. You have my written testimony, so I'm going to be extremely brief on this. I got very capable people who are going to speak more to it, and there's no need to drag it out, so to speak. Some of the responsibilities, the reason why I'm here and the reason why I'm thankful for the senator in introducing this bill, some of the roles and responsibilities of the Office of the State Treasurer have changed or have been enhanced. And by that I mean, as was mentioned, we took over 529, and by the way, I did ask for that, so that's on me. I've learned to keep my mouth shut, though. But no, I had no, well, I won't say greater thrill, but no, I took a lot of pride into trying to resolve that. I had heard from many of you, many members of the General Assembly, as you all had heard from constituents, and we all understand about our children, their education. So my staff and I, we dove deep into that to get that resolved. And then some of the other boards and commissions we're on, like Public Works, Capital Debt, Affordability, Commission of State Debt, the Maryland State Retirement Pension Systems, on and on. But those jobs are all, there's a nexus to the Office of the State Treasurer. There is, in my view, a real reason why we should be on those boards. The one, at least from my view from MES, we know the unfortunate situation that unfolded there, and I remember there was a need, a desire to have greater oversight there. But the reality is, the Office of the State Treasurer being on there would not have prevented that situation from occurring. That we don't audit, the workers there. We just serve on the board. So what I'm saying is, I do not believe my presence or any treasurer's presence could have prevented that situation from unfolding. But, like I said, that is what it is. We've moved forward. We have a wonderful executive director who's keeping everyone on the straight and narrow. And I would just conclude my remarks by saying we are laser focused in the Office of the State Treasurer on our constitutional responsibilities, the things that you've asked us to do, certainly dealing with the state's money. And I know specifically with our pension system, we're working to get up the returns on that. So we would like to stay focused on that mission and the things, dealing with the state's money, and respectfully request a favorable vote on Senate Bill 315.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Why don't we go to you, Secretary Flora, next.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to keep this short. I was asked to serve on this board, and as Secretary of Planning, can attest that there's no conflicts that I would see in terms of the Department of Planning being part of the overall board. And I think this is a great opportunity in terms of the intersection of what the work planning does around sustainable growth and our focus on human well-being, environmental interest, and of course, growing our economy and all of those intersections. So I am happy to serve and look forward to working with Director Glass and the other board members, just here to support the legislation overall. Thank you.
Okay, Director Glass.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having us here. Thank you to Senator Brooks and to Vice Chair Kagan for sponsoring and co-sponsoring this bill. Thank you to the State Treasurer for stating that he believes that things are in good order at MES. We have done a lot in the last 4 years to improve our delivery of services and to make sure that everyone in the state knows that we are more than transparent. We are, clearly visible every month, presenting expenses that anyone can see from our streamed and recorded meetings, and that we really do look forward to continuing to serve the state in our multivariate fashion. Just a couple things I noted that were not mentioned. We do require a super majority to deliver our contractual agreements, to pass contracts, and that requires that we have 5 members present for the quorum and 5 positive votes to move forward. And there are 7 voting members. I'm a non-voting member. So it's critical with all the responsibilities of the State Treasurer, and he has continued to make sure that he or a subordinate is present, but I know that that's a load on them to sit at our 3-hour board meetings monthly. We do have a lot of cross-sectional areas of positive correspondence with the Secretary of Planning. We do very few, if any, contracts with them. We have a small support we do for GIS support, but we don't have the same conflicts that would present if other secretaries were on our board. So with that, I just also would like to ask for a favorable report. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you to Senator Brooks, the panel. Questions? Okay, Seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 315. Thank you, panel. We're going to next move to Senate Bill 176. Secretary Addix, are you, Secretary Addix, still? There you are. Secretary Addix, why don't you come up? And then also we've got Rachel Jones from your shop as well. And those are the only two witnesses on this bill. Senate Bill 176. Secretary Addix.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill, Secretary Kevin Addix, for the record, Department of Agriculture. Senate Bill 176 is, as most of these will be, and I'm happy to say, a simple bill. What it does, and I know that's a running joke, but what it does is it takes information that is collected by the soil conservation districts currently that is shared with the Department of Environment to also be shared with the Department of Agriculture. We will use that for the purposes of statistics, and then if and when needed for the purposes of enforcement. But it is information that is very helpful for us. As you saw the slides before, we need data on what's happening on the ground, and this is one source of data that currently goes to the Department of Environment, but does not come to Department of Agriculture. I would turn it over to Rachel Jones to provide any other feedback.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Rachel Jones, Director of Government Relations for MDA. And so under this proposed legislation, as the Secretary has already said, MDA would have access to the same soil and water quality plans that the soil conservation districts are already required to provide to MDE. And that's going to help us with our nutrient management compliance measures. And so the bill would still limit it so that we could use that data for, let's say, helping to investigate whether or not livestock had access to streams or certain bodies of water, or whether or not proper adequate stream exclusions were put in place. So under the current Maryland nutrient management regulations, livestock have to be kept away from water bodies. The new authority that this particular legislation would give us would help us to determine whether or not voluntary measures were taken to avoid or prevent that. And so again, this is something that the districts are already providing to MDE, so it's not information that would be too onerous for them to have to produce a new report. It's just information that they'd also be sharing with MDA, and with that, we'd ask for a favorable report.
Okay, any questions for the Secretary? We've got, for Ms. Jones, Senator Gallion.
Thank you. Good afternoon once again, Mr. Secretary. Rachel, good to see you. When you gave your briefing earlier, you talked about partnerships with soil conservation districts. So, you mentioned that when we were a little bit ago. I noticed, everybody's favorable except they just did a letter of information on this bill. I was wondering, as we talked about the partnerships, if you reached out and kind of worked with them on this, was there a partnership in crafting this legislation with them?
So the soil conservation districts are sort of a subsidiary of MDA, and so our resource conservation team did share this proposal with them, and we were told that we had approval from the Maryland Association of Soil Conservation Districts once those folks were briefed on the proposal and what exactly we were doing. And so we did share the idea with them. I will say on the front end, we didn't coordinate because it's still our job to be the regulatory authority as the state agency, but we did share the concept with them, and we were told that they were in favor of it.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 176, and we're going to next stay right there. We're going to next move to Senate Bill 240. Secretary Addix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 240, and again, Secretary Addix with Department of Agriculture. Senate Bill 240 makes changes to our Maryland Agriculture Commission and our Young Farmers Boards as part of an ongoing effort to make these bodies more efficient and also more representative of the actual agriculture that we have on the ground. I will ask for your favorable report on this, but I'll turn it over to Rachel for any finer details.
Thank you. So this particular legislation alters the membership of the Maryland Agricultural Commission. I'll say Ag Commission for short. So it's going to eliminate certain seats that we feel are outdated, and it will add other seats that will provide a broader perspective or representation of the industry. So it's a 31-member commission currently. It serves as an advisory board to the Secretary and to the Office of the Governor. These folks are appointed by the governor, and they share their perspectives, and that helps us inform the decisions we make as an agency. And so we talked about how some of the seats are a little bit outdated, so I just want to give a review of the fact that the Ag Commission, they've got a couple of different names, but the Ag Commission met throughout 2024 and developed a strategic plan. And during that process, they outlined a framework, and they came up with the proposed modifications that we're going to share now. And so what the Ag Commission voted to do was to expand the agritourism seat to value-added agriculture, to amend the horse breeding seat to represent the entire equine industry, to clarify that the horticulture seat will focus on fruit production, and that will be a sister seat to the vegetable producer seat. It modifies the nursery seat to nursery, landscape, and greenhouses to be more encompassing of the growth of that industry through the years. It removes duplicative seats for poultry, dairy, nursery, and related agricultural service seats. So in the past, there has been a Dairy 1 seat and a Dairy 2 seat. So 2 folks from each of those industries have sat on the commission. And so this removes that second seat for the listed particular industries. It also removes the tobacco grower seat. Some of you are very familiar with the tobacco buyout and the fact that Maryland has transitioned away from growing tobacco over the last 20, 25 years. And so we felt with the shift in the industry, the tobacco grower seat was no longer necessary in the commission. And additionally, in place of the seats that we're removing to reflect the broader growth of the industry in recent years, we are adding seats for controlled environment agriculture. That's your hydroponics, aquaponics, your indoor growing type of operations. It adds a seat for an urban and small farmer, a seat for historically underserved farmers, a seat for a young farmer, seat for a veteran farmer, and a seat for a new and beginning farmer. Because as you can see, most of the other seats are industry specific, and so these ones are a little broader and allows the opportunity for folks who may be familiar with agriculture or be working in agriculture but don't necessarily specialize in one of the industries identified for the commission, like dairy. And so with that, we also recognize that we have a Young Farmers Advisory Board. So the second thing the bill does is it would make the Young Farmers Advisory Board defunct. It would absorb the Young Farmers Advisory Board into the Ag Commission by creating a Young Farmer Committee and creating a seat for a young farmer. And one of the things that I want to note there is that we'd like to offer a friendly amendment, which is that our AG and our director of the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation noted that their board currently has a seat for a member from the Young Farmers Advisory Committee. And so as we are seeking to to modify the membership with this particular bill, we have drafted an amendment. We would simply like to change the language in statute to ensure that it says that a member of the Ag Commission Committee on Young Farmers serves on the MALF board instead. And with that, we'd ask for a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for either the Secretary or Ms. Jones? Okay, seeing none. We do have 2 additional witnesses signed up favorable, so I'm actually going to bring them up as well, and then we'll get back to the next bill. So I'm going to call up John Lewis and Harrison Palmer. Mr. Palmer, Mr. Lewis, you're both signed up straight favorable, so why don't you come up, we're going to put you guys on the clock since you're not really with the Secretary here, so you're going to have 2.5 minutes each, okay? So whoever wants to start, go on.
Sure, I'll start. For the record, this is Harrison Palmer. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Maryland Agricultural Commission at MDA. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and the members of the committee for this time this afternoon. We submitted written testimony that overlines a lot of the changes that are going to be proposed within this bill, and Rachel did a great job explaining sort of the proposals that came through. But I want to touch on a couple of things that provide a bit of context. Since 1961, when the commission was first created, it appointed agricultural leaders from across the state to bring valuable perspectives to advise the secretary and the state government, and has expanded its membership over time to make sure that it's, covering all aspects of the evolving industry. So the proposal in this bill, and as Rachel covered, came from an internal strategic plan that the commission developed throughout the first several months of 2024, focusing on maximizing effectiveness, efficiency, and representation on the commission. In this plan, and I won't go over all the seat changes because Rachel did, but the outline and proposal from the commission really took a look at what agriculture looks like today, what agriculture is going to look like tomorrow, and how they can be working to advise the department and state government on ensuring that those operations are conducive and supportive of that industry. So the Ag Commission itself has played a pretty integral role in representing the boots on the ground perspective to the executive branch for over 60 years. And this grassroots initiatives such as the strategic plan to present a unified voice that is fully representative of Maryland's agricultural industry is critical for the success of the commission moving forward and advising the secretary. So we ask for a favorable report and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you take that, push the mic to your left, okay? Tell us who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kelly Lewis. I'm general manager and partner at Rupert Nurseries. We're a 900-acre farm in Montgomery County, and I'm here to testify on my own behalf. I am also the chairman of the Ag Commission that we mentioned. Much of my written submitted testimony has been covered here today, so I don't think I need to repeat much of that. But this plan was unanimously adopted by the commission last year. In its early stages, it's been very productive to be broken into the smaller groups where we can concentrate on our strengths and experience. And I just hope that we can support this bill. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, again, for Mr. Lewis or Mr. Palmer or Secretary Addicks, et cetera? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 240. Let's next move back to you, Secretary Addicks, Ms. Jones, on Senate Bill 249. Secretary Addicks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Addicks, Secretary of Agriculture, here to discuss Senate Bill 249, pesticide and pest control, revisions to pesticide applicators law, and repeal of obsolete provisions. In summary, and of course Rachel will go into details, the Fed provided guidance and asked states to formulate a plan for how it will regulate pesticide applicator licenses going forward. We did so. Our plan has been approved by the EPA, and now we must put it into statute. So we are here to respectfully request that it be added to statute. I will turn it over to Rachel Jones for details.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, so in 2023, the EPA established new regulations on restricted use pesticides and who could apply them. And so these aren't just your standard pesticides. They are pesticides that have, chemical compounds that may have folks may have a stronger sensitivity to. And so these are typically applied by commercial applicators or what have you. And so when the EPA passed those regulations, they basically then gave each state time to come up with a certification plan that established exactly how each Department of Agriculture would make it possible for pesticide applicators to be certified to be able to continue applying restricted use pesticides in their state. And so MDA took last year to come up with our plan that was approved by the EPA. And so now we simply do need to conform state law to updated federal regulations. And so what this does, is MDA, like I said, MDA certification plan was approved in November of 2023. Non-certified applicators have to complete the training outlined in the rule that we established. They have to complete worker protection standard handler training or complete a program, again, approved by MDA. And so MDA's plan has three particular tenets to it. So commercial applications of restricted use pesticides can be done by either a certified pest control applicator or a certified public agency applicator. Those are two classifications that we already have, that folks already apply for one or two of those licenses in order to be able to apply pesticides in Maryland. But in order to apply restricted use pesticides, they'd have to have one of those particular licenses, or private applications of restricted use pesticides can be done by either a certified private applicator or an individual working under the direct supervision of a certified private applicator who is certified in the specific category of application being utilized. And lastly, a non-certified applicator can only use restricted use pesticides under the direct supervision of a certified private applicator. And so these are the standards that we've developed. Current law provides that restricted use pesticides can only be applied by or under the direct supervision of a certified applicator, and private applicators apply restricted use pesticides to their own property or to rented land to produce agricultural commodities. This is no longer in compliance with EPA regulations. And so with that, MDA would respectfully ask for a favorable report on this bill.
Okay, I just got a letter from the city of Baltimore expressing concern. I'll just read you, just showed up here on my desk. It says, among other things, it says, currently the bill does not allow for the transfer of liability through written consent agreements, a practice currently used in programs like the RAT-RUBOUT program. Such agreements are essential for balancing operational effectiveness with legal protections for public agency operators. Without those provisions, the bill could impose significant operational challenges for city pest control efforts. And anyway, and there's more here, and we'll share this with you. Have you heard from the city of Baltimore from Baltimore City about this? Okay. Well, just, you know, in the record, it's a letter of concern that they've submitted, so take that into account is really what I think they're suggesting.
Certainly, and Mr. Chair, we can certainly reach out to them because, again, we now have to conform to federal regulations. And what we can do is we can go back and look at our plan and see how we could address the concerns that they have. We'd have to have that plan reapproved by the EPA in order to address their specific concerns, but we will reach out to them and follow up.
Why don't you do that, because we obviously have a couple members from Baltimore City here. So any additional questions for the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 249. We're going to next move Secretary to Senate Bill 264. Again, Senate Bill 264.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you very much. Kevin Addix, Secretary of Agriculture, here to present Senate Bill 264, Plant Disease Control, Nurseries, Inspection, Certification, and Licensing Fees. This essentially is an effort on our part to pay for this program. So we are operating this program based on fees that were last adjusted in 2004. And as you know, lots of things have been adjusted since 2004, including the cost of doing business. These are special funds. They do run the program. So this is essentially a request to increase those fees. I can turn it over to Rachel Jones for details.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Committee. For our last departmental to be heard today, so as the Secretary just explained, these fees haven't been raised in over 20 years. And so a lot of our programs, I know last year we came before you with several departmental bills asking for the ability to increase some of our fees because program operations, in addition to salary and benefits, all of that is tied to the fees that come in for the particular inspections that those particular departments do. And so this particular department, not only do they have operational needs, that they need additional funding to be able to continue to function efficiently, but, you know, in order to properly maintain staff and pay them adequately, these fees would need to be increased. As we find that we've had bills in recent years on invasive species and native plants and the desire for various nursery brokers to be inspected to ensure that they're not selling invasives or that they're focusing on promoting natives, well, we have to have inspectors and staff to be able to travel across the state to those various facilities and operations to ensure that those brokers are in compliance, that they're properly licensed. And so what we're asking for our plant industries and plant protection and weed management section is asking for the ability to be able to increase a couple of fees. These are inspection fees. They're based on the number of acres in production at various nurseries. And so for 1 acre or less, it would be a $10 increase from $10 to $20. For at 1 acre to 5 acres, it'd be another $10 increase in that annual fee from $20 to $30. For a 5 to 10 acre production field, it would be an increase again in $10 from $30 to $40. And for more than 5 acres, it would increase from $3 to $5 per acre. Or for any acre, any part of an acre, up to a maximum of $1,500 instead of a maximum of $1,000 for a larger nursery. And again, we felt like these fees were incremental. We looked at our budget. We didn't ask for an exorbitant increase, but just enough so that the particular unit would be able to sustain its operations. And so we would, again, respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Secretary Addix or Rachel Jones? We're going to go to Senator Augustine, and we do have just, one additional witness favorable, but we also have an unfavorable in person that's going to come up after you. So Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This year, this session, we're going to be really, at least I know I am, going to be really concentrating on just the cost of doing business, the cost of living, the costs of being Maryland and being competitive. And so with that in mind, it's just for me, it's like and then also we just have real challenges, like real scrutiny on any sort of thing where you're raising fees or you're doing stuff like that. Right now, what is this now? I mean, what do we gain? You said it, but I mean, are they currently being inspected? I mean, are these fees right now, or is this process right now being augmented, like let's say by general funds, or what's the situation, or is it just not getting done?
There are no general funds for this particular program. It is fully specially funded, fully based on the existing fees. And so again, this particular department would love to have an increase. They'd love to have more inspectors. They'd love to be able to offer a higher salary to attract and retain folks to travel across the state and do these types of inspections. But their entire program is this is a consumer protection program, and it's completely funded by these existing fees.
Okay.
Senator, I'll add one thing. We are in an incredibly competitive market in terms of our inspection teams. As soon as we get our inspectors trained up, there is a high likelihood that USDA, EPA, someone else can pull them over at a much higher salary. So there's that piece of it. I think this is more about expanding our capacity and making sure that we can inspect these industries that are growing. Nursery landscape is growing. And so being able to get out there and be out there more frequently is critical.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have some additional questions? Okay, seeing none. Why don't you guys are good to go. Thank you for all your bill testimony today. I'm going to call up the one favorable in person signed up, Celeste Flynn. Celeste Flynn here. Okay, don't see her. Going once, twice, 3 times. We do have one unfavorable, Robert Torben. Is Mr. Torben here today? Okay, Mr. Torben is not here, so that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 264. We're going to next now move to a few Maryland Department of Environment bills, and we're going to start with Senate Bill 265. And I've got Alex Butler, Matthew Rao, and Gregory Bush all signed up favorable with amendments. You guys must have some amendments to proffer to the committee. And whoever wants to go first, you're the 3 witnesses on the bill. MDE. Again, Senate Bill 265.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Alex Butler here, representing the Maryland Department of the Environment, here to present Senate Bill 265, Reservoir Augmentation Permit Establishment, also known as Indirect Potable Water Reuse. Senate Bill 265 is building on a successful pilot program approved by the General Assembly in 2023 for the city of Westminster, Maryland. So what we're doing here generally is we're treating wastewater to drinking standards, sending it to a reservoir for holding, treating it again to drinking water standards for use by the consumer. Maryland is a mostly water-rich state but in some areas, we need to look to new methods to ensure we have the water supply that we need with the same water quality standards. This process has worked in several other states for many years, and since 2023, we've been making it work here in Maryland. We would like to build upon that. That pilot program expires in 2028, and we'd like to graduate this to a permanent program. So as you said, Mr. Chair, there are some amendments. They are in your packet. They are simply technical clarifying amendments. And with that, I will turn it over to Matt Rowe and Greg Bush from the department.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for having me here to speak on behalf of Senate Bill 265. My name is Greg Bush. I am the program manager of the Water Supply Program at the Maryland Department of the Environment. I'm going to talk a little bit today about why we need a water reuse bill in Maryland. So as Mr. Butler said, historically, Maryland has been a water-rich state, and that continues to be true on the whole. I think in specific areas, we do see periods of time during climate change-induced drought or due to growth that there's not enough water to meet demands of specific systems. And so we see this bill as being necessary just to promote the viability of a lot of our communities and give them an additional tool to make sure that their water supplies continue to be sustainable in the face of all of these challenges. So Senate Bill 265 would establish a potable reuse program specifically focused on reservoir augmentation. It allows for the safe and regulated use of reclaimed water to provide drinking water to folks, making sure that it meets drinking water standards. It provides benefits not just to the environment, but also to our economics. On an environmental side of things, the bill ensures that we're not relying completely on streams and rivers to provide all our resources for certain communities, but actually, providing some relief, particularly during droughts where those ecosystems are already stressed. The bill also ensures that our communities will have the ability to continue to grow economically and won't be constrained by shortage of water into the future. The technologies that we're looking at are similar to ones that have already been used across the country. I think California has been on the cutting edge of potable reuse, and so this is a longstanding technology that's well established and something that you've probably been familiar with it if you've traveled across the country. We see this bill as being a forward-looking, science-based bill and a solution to make sure that we have the we can secure Maryland's water future, and making sure that this is something that we have in our toolkits when water systems are looking to do planning out decades, for the coming decades. So with that, I thank you, and I respectfully ask the committee to issue a favorable report on Senate Bill 265.
Yes, and just briefly here I want to thank Chair Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan and the sponsors of the bill for helping us. I think Greg, and I'm the Deputy Director, Matt Rowe, in the Water Science Administration at MDE for the record. And we've been working historically through pilot efforts, really, in water reuse. And I think having a formal program that this bill establishes will really help with consistency, not only for future sustainability of our water supplies, but also for public health. So just here to support this bill, and thank you for your time and attention.
Okay, any questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 265. We're going to next move to, and why don't you guys stay here because you're going to be on the next panel. Senator Hester, Senate Bill 117, and you have three panelists, and those three panelists are the three gentlemen at the witness table. So this works out perfectly. Again, we're on Senate Bill 117, and we again have Alex Butler, Matthew Rao, and Gregory Bush up there as Senator Hester's panel. So Senator Hester, the floor is yours, Senate Bill 117.
Okay, sorry, I got the wrong folder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's my first bill in this committee this year. Thank you for consideration of Senate Bill 117, the Bay Restoration Fund Septic System Upgrade, a bill I'm sponsoring at the request of the Department of the Environment. As you well know, the Bay Restoration Fund is a nationally recognized funding program that has played a critical role in Maryland's Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic coastal bays restoration efforts. The BRF provides financial assistance for wastewater treatment plant upgrades, septic system upgrades, and sewer connections and agricultural cover crops. So the bill makes 4 changes to the fund. First of all, under the current law, the BRF septic system funding places top priority on failing systems located within the critical area. And this bill would make those failing systems in any nitrogen impaired watershed in the state the next highest priority. The second thing the bill does is that it authorizes the department to set reimbursement rates for best available technology for nitrogen removal, BAT septic systems, based on the system's actual nitrogen removal efficiency. This is a form of pay for performance. The next thing that the bill does is it grants greater flexibility for moderate income homeowners to cover more expensive items, such as a drain field replacement that could jeopardize an otherwise beneficial project. And finally, the bill replaces a static eligibility date that makes good policy sense. When the BRF was originally created, it was specified that only septic systems installed on or before October 1st of 2008 were eligible for assistance. And as of now, it's now 2025, the state is starting to exclude some homeowners whose septic systems have reached the end of their natural lifespan. I understand that MD is currently working on some technical amendments with interested parties, but once we have those amendments, I would like to request a favorable report on Senate Bill 117.
Okay, thank you. We'll take the panel.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Alex Butler, representing the Maryland Department of Environment, here in strong support of Senate Bill 117. I'd like to thank the Senator Hester for bringing the bill forward. We're here in support for 4 key reasons. It makes 4 updates to the Bay Restoration Fund to help expand the availability of funds to failing septic systems in need and help improve nitrogen reductions. We're seeing systems in areas outside of the critical area worthy of targeted investment, and currently the BRF focuses on the critical area, but we want to expand that to nitrogen-impaired watersheds and establish that as another priority. Those are areas not in the critical area, but within a watershed of a body of water that has high levels of nitrogen. The second, the bill expands financial assistance to moderate income homeowners for upgrades and maintenance, such as drain field replacements. Homeowners may not be able to afford those types of projects without the assistance, but they are important. Third, the bill authorizes MDE to incentivize consumers to select systems that are using better technology and achieving more nitrogen reductions by establishing performance-based funding levels directly based on how efficiently a system achieves those nitrogen reductions. Simply put, if a consumer picks a better performing system, they receive a little bit more funding. Performance-based levels would not constrain consumer choice, but any consumers can pick any system that they would like from the approved BAT list, but it would gently nudge people to select a product that removes more nitrogen. Last and most importantly, the bill changes an outdated provision in the BRF that, when originally created, limited eligibility to systems installed prior to 2008. Senate Bill 117 would change that to a rolling deadline of 15 years before the application is submitted. This would allow systems beginning to reach the end of their life cycle and ultimately fail to be eligible for assistance. So we do have some amendments that the Senator mentioned. We're working on the exact language with a few advocates. Very briefly, what they do is specify priority to areas within direct drainage of a nitrogen-impaired body of water, so tightening up that language a little bit, and then also including another priority, the 500-year floodplain. So with that, I'll turn it over to some experts from our department, Greg Bush and Matt Rowe.
Matt Rowe again. Thank you, members of the committee, chair, co-chair, for hearing for Senator Hester for sponsoring this bill for us. Again, for the record, Matthew Rowe, Deputy Director of Water and Science Administration. And it was actually, I think, really timely that this bill hearing is after the panel we just had on Bay Restoration. As you heard, non-point source is a challenge for us. It's you know, the new science and CSER findings are saying we need to do better addressing non-point source. And if you looked at the septic loads and the graphs that were shown in that presentation, they're flat. So we need to do better, you know, targeting septic system upgrades to best available technology in higher nitrogen loading areas. This bill helps with that. We've also worked closely, as was discussed, with both sides, both industry and the environmental groups, to find a balanced solution. Still working out some technical amendments, as was discussed, but these are, I think, common sense improvements to an already successful program, the Bay Restoration Program. It increases efficiency, provides targeted assistance, as was mentioned, to those who need it most, and better protects Maryland's waterways. So I urge the committee to give Senate Bill 117 a favorable report, and we're happy to answer questions. Thank you so much.
Okay, any additional testimony from the panel, or just here for questions?
No additional testimony.
Okay, okay, questions for the panel? Okay, Senator Washington.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Hester, for the bill. For the department, have you reviewed the recommended transfers from the Bay Restoration Fund that are proposed under the governor's bill? And do you see any impact in the overall, has the department analyzed the potential impact on the Water and Science Administration?
I haven't looked into those details yet. I don't anticipate with this program, I don't anticipate impacts, not having looked into the details, but we can follow up on that for sure.
I would recommend looking at, so I'd like to hear that, because it certainly would impact the ability to support septics if money's being transferred for other reasons or to the general fund.
We're certainly reviewing that, Senator, and we'll get you a detailed explanation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you. We do have several, one panel favorable with amendment witnesses. I'm going to call them up, and this will be the extent of the rest of the testimony. You guys are good to go?
Thank you.
Drew Schmidt-Perkins, Matthew Geckel, Emily Ranson, Edward Harrison, and then finally Bill Castelli. Those are the 5 witnesses all signed up favorable with amendment. And so if I called your name and you're here, come on up. Okay.
I was just, Mr. Chair, Drew Schmidt-Perkins, I was here for backup if Ms. Ranson had to leave earlier. So I'm a me too and stepping back.
Perfect. Okay, who wants to put the mic in front of you and tell us who you are? And again, you're signed FWA, and you're on the clock though, 2.5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here mostly favorable on SB 117. We really appreciate the department coming forward with this bill. We are still working on a couple little refinements, mostly focused on the maps that they're going to ultimately be using. We are very interested in the ability of the Bay Restoration Fund to be able to be of more assistance to people who are living outside the 1,000-foot buffer around tidal waters of the Chesapeake Bay. There are non-tidal nitrogen-impaired waterways in the state, and so that is the big concern that we have, and we look forward to continuing to work with them on it. That being said, we're mindful that we are looking at spreading the mayonnaise a little bit further, and so we want to make sure that it's not opening up too many areas of the state so that the Bay Restoration Fund would be less available to help with nitrogen reductions. So again, we appreciate the department and look forward to continuing to work with them, and hopefully we'll have some language refined in a meeting or 2. Thank you.
Okay, Emily, why don't you pass the mic over to you? Tell us who you are, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair and member of the committee. My name is Matthew Geckel. I'm with Back River Precast, a Maryland concrete manufacturing company, and I'm also a licensed on-site wastewater professional. We're in favor of this bill except for the ranking. The way MDE currently ranks BATs is not entirely accurate. The system that they have ranked currently number 1 was booted out of Long Island's program for not meeting nitrogen reduction. So we would suggest that MDE pull this part from the bill and get together with the stakeholders and come up with a more accurate ranking system so that we can more fairly rank the BATs that are out there. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Yes, sir. How you doing? My name's, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and the committee. My name is Eddie Harrison. I'm the Legislative Liaison for MALPA, Maryland On-Site Wastewater Professional Association. MALPA appreciates the Maryland Department of Environment's efforts to improve upon the Bay Restoration Fund and the fund's purpose of reducing nitrogen and nutrients in the Chesapeake Bay and trying to get the best value for their money. MALPA is in support of SB 117 with amendments. The BRF program is a very successful program that, as an industry member, we utilize it a lot, and it helps out a lot of property owners with getting systems on properties that otherwise wouldn't be able to get one. MALPA's membership has no real consensus on two of the points, which the impaired waterways and changing the age of the system. But we're very in favor of expanding to include dispersal systems or drain fields. Okay? The BAT ranking that is proposed in this bill, as it's written, is detrimental to small business. It will also ultimately reduce options for consumers, designers, and installers. It is unclear in this bill, in the way it's worded, what the parameters of the MDE plans to use to rate these systems. If they use the current parameters used in the current ranking document is incomplete. Okay, it only does the installation, the price of the equipment, the routine maintenance, and the energy consumption. But there's a lot of other expenses to go in. Some of these systems nickel dime you to death. I do service providing. That's what I do. I work on these things. Some of them require constant maintenance, and others require no ongoing maintenance other than routine. Let's see. All BAT systems currently meet the exceeding qualifications. They meet the 50% that MD wants them to. If a technology leaves the market because they get squeezed out because of the ranking, we will lose the support from that equipment. I got a couple systems that we call orphan systems that I service, and I have to go buy parts from the actual manufacturer of the part because is that me going? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's you.
We recommend this bill go back for discussion.
Gotcha. Okay. Senator Washington, did you have a question? Okay, Senator Hester.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your testimony, and I was just curious, are there other rankings that you would suggest that that they use instead? And I mean, it's a new ranking, right? Because
we're not against the ranking, but it should be fair to me. We don't have enough data, and MD has the vehicle to collect the data, but it's going to start from now to do it. But on how expensive some of these systems cost more to maintain, because I got one that requires parts almost every other year, and another one almost never put parts in. And then there's pump outs. Most all of them require, when you pump them out, to evacuate all the sludge and then put fresh water back in it, and a technician has to be there doing that. So you got 3 contractors on the job at the time. So this pump out can be $1,000. So to me, that stuff should be tracked. And you have the Batman, which is a data system that keeps track of the BATs. It could be very easily, the IT people could just very easily keep track of that. If as we service it, we put that stuff in. So it's just more, these things just cost more to take care of than just the annual maintenance done to them.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, additional questions? Don't see any. Thank you to the witnesses. That concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 117, which brings us, we've got 3 last bills of the day are all Senator Simon Ayer bills. And we are going to be starting with Senate Bill 89, if that works for you, Senator. And you've got 3 panelists signed up. Actually, one has had to leave. David Dragix is here, and David Heredia. Those are 2 witnesses. So I see Mr. Dragix, you are here, and is Mr. Heredia here?
I think he had to leave as well.
Okay, and then the only other, we have 1 virtual witness signed up favorable. Is that person in the queue? Okay, so after you 2, we've got 1 virtual witness signed up straight favorable as well. Senator Simon Ayer, Senate Bill 89.
Thank you. And for the record, Senator Brian Simon Ayer presenting Senate Bill 89. I will make this brief. But I did want to publicly thank the Department of Environment and the Department of Veterans and Military Family and the advocates for their support in this consensus legislation. We also have a Veterans Caucus letter that I'll get to you. They just didn't get it in time. I don't believe there's any opposition. So this is a simple bill. It allows veterans to have a veterans notation on their professional licenses. And the key aspects of this bill is, one, it's modeled after the MVA program with their driver's license notation. The big difference is it's optional. It's not mandated like the MVA. And the reason for that is to give the departments flexibility and timing in doing this. So they could upgrade software licenses if they had to. It could be coordinated with that, or they could pilot it on a few if they wanted. However, if it is implemented, it has to have basically the same framework as the MVA, where they give the veteran the option to get their notation put on the license, and then also give them the option to consent to have the department share information about veterans' benefits and services to them. So the reason for the bill is it gives greater outreach to veterans. Currently, MVA reaches about half our veterans in the state. This will provide more outreach. Creates multiple benefits as far as networking and reducing isolation. As you know, I've worked on bills dealing with veteran suicide, and one of the key components is isolation. Practical ways how they do it, public can thank them when they see this, or veterans have come up, veteran to veteran, have communications, or reinforcing that they're not alone. It's another tool to share the benefits, and it's potentially financially beneficial to them, you know, hire a veteran, repeat, or even maybe get a good tip. So with that, I'll leave it at that and ask for your favorable consideration.
Okay, Mr. Dragic.
Chair Feldman, members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in favor of Senator Simon Ayer's bill. For the record, I'm Dave Dragic, a retired Army Colonel and Legislative Director for the Maryland Military Coalition. We strongly support this bill and what it does for the benefit of veterans. Implementing processes for notating veteran status on a license or certificate is an important step. More importantly, recognition of veteran status in state processes, assuming the individual consents to do so, reduces the burden on the veteran to prove his or her eligibility for state or federal benefits, saving them the personal time and effort to do so. And as we all know too well, for the uninitiated, it can be a daunting experience working with any bureaucracy. So this proactive step makes it easier for those who have served other than dishonorably. So the Maryland Military Coalition strongly supports SB 89, asks for a favorable report from this committee, and we'd like to thank Senator Simon Ayer for sponsoring this legislation and appreciate his leadership on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Before I go, question, is Mr. Heredia, I don't know, somebody just walked in. Okay, that's not him. Okay, questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you guys. We do have one virtual witness. You wanna, she's there, okay. We've got the mayor, Dr. Kashina Cross. Mayor from Glen Arden. Mayor, you've got 2.5 minutes and you've signed up straight favorable. Actually, you're a mayor. We're not going to put you on the clock. Mayor, can you hear me? There you go. Go.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and all the vice chairs and all the committee members. And thank you to Senator Simon Ayer, as well as I believe Senator Jackson, for bringing this much needed legislation. I love optional bills where the member itself has the opportunity to self-identify. Let me just say that in the state of Maryland, we would be setting the record. We would be in a position as a state leading the Veteran Recognition Program and providing a streamlined mechanism for veterans to access state and federal benefits related to their professional endeavors. I myself, a retired 20-year veteran of the United States Air Force, had the unique opportunity to serve in over 7 different career fields, and each of which came with their own special certification. I was top 1% in NATO, and I also have a Prince 2 certification, which is equivalence in Europe to our certifications here when you talk about program management. It is very key to also understand that many of our veterans will work in various avenues like finance, like infrastructure, and even transportation, all of which we all have possibly a CDL. I myself received a bus driver's license. It's very important that if there are key certifications, that these million-dollar educations that we have afforded and the experience and the expanded opportunities that the military gives our veterans be adequately recognized and contributing to our community in a meaningful way. I don't have to say this, but I will go ahead. The veterans of our community are just over 300 plus thousand in the state of Maryland. This is a significant population, Mr. Chair, and all members of the committee and all who are present, and an immense value for our state to include leadership, discipline, problem solving skills, and a steadfast commitment to service. And that's one thing I'll say. Also, as a life member of the American Legion and the American Veterans Association, it is very important to understand that we directly continue to enable our local, county, and state government leaders to succeed. Linking veteran status directly to professionals' credentials will provide access again to the most efficient way of reducing administrative hurdles for our veterans. Let's get our veterans working again and connect them to such a beautiful tailored support program as Senate Bill 89. I am 100% in support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any questions for the mayor or the two witnesses at the table? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 89. We will next proceed to Simon Ayer Bill Part 2, Senate Bill 162. And the only other witness we've got is, well, she's only signed up for information. Is Rachel Jones still here?
Sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah, okay. Well, here, let Senator Simon Ayer do his thing, and then you'll come up and she's just signed up information only. So Senator Simon Ayer, we're on Senate Bill 162.
Thank you. For the record, Senator Simon Ayer, Senate Bill 162. This is a real easy bill. So basically what this does is it repeals obsolete section dealing with cantaloupe inspections. The reason is the U.S. Department of Agriculture and U.S. Food and Drug Administration are now responsible for the inspections. So you may ask, why in the world, or how did I ever come up with this bill? As I was going through law, I found out that Anne Arundel County was exempt from this section. So I said to myself, why is only one county exempt if it's a great thing? I was thinking about putting them back in. And then I started talking with the department and they said, we haven't been doing this for over a decade. It's because it's been transferred to the federal government. We recommend you just repeal this section. And that's how the bill came. So we hear that people think we put too many laws on the book. Well, we can go home now and say we're taking some off the book. So with that, I'll ask for your favorable consideration.
And I tell everybody how this committee has the broadest jurisdiction of any committee in the General Assembly. It's getting broader, like literally every day. Okay, with that said,
Getting Rachel? If not, I'll wait.
well, let's take questions for the sponsor, Senator Simon Ayer, and then we'll bring up Ms. Jones. Okay, seeing none.
Me?
Oh, I'm sorry, apologize. Okay, Vice Chair
I was going
Kagan.
to wait for lovely former delegate Rachel Jones, but Senator, I am not trying to be partisan here. I am not trying to be obnoxious. Like, seriously, authentically. With this administration and their lack of commitment to health, science, reducing government, can we be clear that they won't start cutting inspectors or decide that cantaloupes don't need to be inspected anymore? Like, I'm really not trying to be funny. Are we premature in thinking about this?
Yeah, I don't know what the federal government's going to do, but we
None of us
control
do.
the Maryland law. So this was the recommendation. So I'm just staying with Maryland.
I'm a little dubious, but I'm wondering how much picking up the slack that the state of Maryland is going to need to be doing as all of the things are happening in Washington. So I don't know if Ms. Jones will have thoughts on that, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senator Simon Ayer. Rachel Jones, why don't you come up here for information purposes of only from the Department of Agriculture on this bill, and so the floor is yours.
And once again, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. So Senator Simon Ayer did reach out early in the interim to start inquiring about this bill. And while this is an informational testimony, we did tell him immediately we'd support a repeal. It was the agency's idea because, as it's already been stated, when he reached out, we've got folks who've been at the agency for 30 years in our food quality program who said, I don't recall us ever inspecting cantaloupes. We're really not even sure why this statute currently exists. And so what we did is we did make the senator aware of USDA programs, their agricultural marketing service grades and standards process, and how they currently have been responsible for inspecting cantaloupes and other fruits that are consumed raw throughout the nation and here in the state of Maryland. What we do have at MDA through our food quality assurance program is a fruit inspection process that we use our produce safety rule in order to implement. And so our program looks at produce safety as it pertains to how it is grown at that particular operation on that site. So what we're looking for, we're not necessarily inspecting the cantaloupe or the fruit itself. We're inspecting the conditions under which it's grown to make sure that those are safe. And then the USDA comes in, excuse me, and follows up with their grading and services program. And I will say that during the previous administration or iteration of the new federal administration, we did not have any issues with USDA grading of fruits and vegetables. And so while we can't speak for what may or may not happen this time, we really can't. MDA does not and has not in well over 20, 30 years actually done any inspections of cantaloupes. And so we would have no opposition to the repeal of that law.
Okay, questions for Ms. Jones? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 162, which brings us to the final bill of the day, Senate Bill 168, Senator Simon Eyre, and we do have, we've got several witnesses signed up. Well, we've got 3 people designated as panelists and then 2 additional witnesses signed up, all favorable. Carl Treff, is Mr. Treff here? Jose Coronado Flores, John Garofolo, and actually there are 2 additional witnesses that are signed up straight favorable, so I'll just bring them up if they're here. Casey Hunter, and finally, final witness is Daniel Scheer. Is Daniel Scheer here? Okay. So that is the panel, all signed up favorable, and it's the final panel of the day, final bill of the day, Senator Simon Eyre.
Thank you. And for the record, Senator Brian Simon Eyre, Senate Bill 168, and I try to have small bill hearings. This one is an exception. But I will say, if you look at your testimony, we have 49 people signed up, and I asked most of them just to do written testimony out of deference to our committee. We had 45 favorable, 3 informational, and 1 unfavorable. The unfavorable was against CAD, but their testimony was favorable for the bill, so it was actually have 46 favorable. The information, we have 3. We have 1 from the port, which is a letter of concern. It basically says we want to do the implementation of CAD themselves. MDE was informational with technical, and we can address that. And then the AG came in with a support in concept. So all informational across the board, but that's what we have. So looking at our PowerPoint, so let me state up front. I am completely supportive of our port. It's a driver of our economy, it jobs. This bill has nothing to do with undermining what our port does, and I appreciate their efforts. But I also appreciate communities. Especially those who live in overburdened communities that have been the brunt of environmental pollution for years, for decades, and trying to protect them and come up with a balance. And that's what I think this legislation does. So what we have here is just to give you an overview from last year. So the port oversees the dredging of our channels. And there's 2 types of material. One is harbor material in the Baltimore harbor material, which is defined in law, and non-harbor material. The harbor material is considered somewhat contaminated, and so they don't put it out in the Chesapeake Bay because of environmental issues. And there's a point in law that says from this point on, you can't take it outside the bay, basically. Outside that line, which starts the bay. Then there's storage of the material. We have, in the area, we have the Masonville storage, and we also have the Cox Creek storage. That Cox Creek is right in our backyard. We're glad to help. So what we did is, if you'll recall last year, I put in a bill to create a task force because the port
didn't do a great job of communicating, and I think they'll admit that. They were going to put a pilot CAD program, and a CAD is a confined aquatic disposal, just to refresh your memory. Basically, they go in the water, dig up a big hole, and take the good material out, and then they come put in less good material. I know that's not proper language, but worse material in that hole, just to store it. Well, when our communities found out they were going to do that, they were a little upset. So we had big town hall meetings, and it was a lot of people came out and were upset. We went and actually talked to the port director, and they paused it indefinitely. He said, "You're right, this is not the way we should go about it." Unfortunately, he had a quick exit, if you'll recall, and we got a new port director, so we had to start all over. So I came in last year and I said, let's put a task force together, talk about the viability of CAD as a concept. If it is good, what should we do about it, and set up parameters. The difference was my task force was an independent study. And if you'll recall, the port came in with a letter of information of opposition, basically, saying they didn't want to do it. Well, you, my colleagues, showed such great support, they actually came and started talking to me. And they said, well, okay, we'll do it, but we'll do it with our work group. So they wanted to do an internal study. And at that point, I agreed. I said, okay, if that's how we have to do it, let's figure out this. But what we've come to find out, you know, when you have the fox guarding the chicken coop, you don't get quite the results you're expecting. You know, I would have really liked to have an independent. All the legislators that are on that subcommittee feel that this is just an exercise basically of checking a box to say we did it. And the end result is, and we, you know, I'll take them out to dinner if I'm wrong, that they're going to say CAD is viable. And I don't believe the community thinks any differently. Now, let me say up front, they have been extremely nice. They've been professional. I have no problems with them with that. And I actually tried to come up with solutions, as I've done with other bills. You see, I've worked a lot this session on a lot of bills, and I've met with them, and I'd set up Zoom calls, and I said, look, how about this solution? And I said, the arbitrary line, if we move that, it'll take some of the capacity restraints off of that area, and we can work on capacity. And they basically said, yeah, that's an interesting idea, but we don't want a legislative solution. I said, well, what about if we can determine, because they said some of the material is clean. I said, what if we say it's clean material, and then we can put that out in the bay and alleviate the pressure on these dredge facilities? Nice idea, but we don't want a legislative solution. We'll take care of it. So then I said, well, in the law, it says you can't do certain things in a confined area. You can do this, you can do it. I said, what is a confined area? There's no definition in law. Can we work together to get a definition of confined area? That's a great idea. We don't want a legislative solution. So I said, you know what? I'm tired of banging my head against it. And I told them on the Zoom call, I said, you know, you're really nice, but everything you say is, I don't want a legislative solution. We'll do it ourselves. And we had a nice conversation about it, but I was just getting tired of it. So I came up with this. I started looking at this area, which is an example, because this is statewide. This is not just our community. And said, what is the environmental impact of our area? And I worked with Department of Environment and some other advocates to find out what the scores were in this area. And it was off the chart. You know, decades after decade, they just keep dumping things in our area. So, wrong way. So I came up with this solution. I'm going the wrong way. This thing's very sensitive. So basically what this bill does, it takes the defined term in law that says overburdened community. And it's basically you have at least three or more categories where you're 75th percentile in the state with pollution, some nasty stuff. And I said, you know what? We've been talking about environmental justice, and it's time to act in this area as well. And I found it interesting that the dredge material, we would go to meetings and they say, you know, it's not that bad a material that we're going to dump out there. And I said, well, if it's not that bad, how come we can't put it in the Chesapeake Bay? Oh, we don't want to do that. You know, it's not that good. So, you know, it's kind of talking out both sides of the mouth on that. So my solution was that we set up a 5-mile radius that says you cannot put a CAD cell in an overburdened residential community. Doesn't ban it in the state. It just says in overburdened communities, we're going to stop dumping in their backyards. That's as simple as the bill is. So I started looking at other states. There's a few of them that are doing this. And let me just tell you, it's controversial. There's lawsuits. This is not a, oh, everybody's doing, they love it type of thing. But if you notice, in this particular one, and I found this in most of them, they're in very protected areas. You can see there the arrow goes out to the blue area. That is where they put the CAD cell. And it's a very industrial area. And you look what the EPA says. It says CAD cells are constructed to reduce the risk from unacceptably contaminated sediments by storing them in a depression in the bottom of a system. And it goes on more about that. What they're proposing is not a protected area. They want to put it out. Let's see here. So you can see here, this is where they want to put it out in the open waters. They have one pilot program they put in 2016, I believe. It was very protected, very isolated, and they even said there they learned some things from that they didn't expect. Well, now they want to put it out in this open area where you have all the current, all the storm surge, and they want to see what happens. And I remember I was at a work group that we were there, and MDE was presenting, and I said, this is completely different than your other pilot program. This is open water, storms and all that. How's that going to work? And he says, we're going to find out what works and what doesn't work, and we'll learn from it. And that's what our community and other communities are concerned about. They don't want to be the test bed for everybody else's problems. So if you see here, that's where they want to put the CAD dump. That's one of the main areas right out there. And the slide showed all kinds of things, coal plants, toxic waste. I mean, it's everything in there. So before you think I'm too far afield on this solution, current law already bans CAD cells in a 5-mile radius around Hart Miller Island. And you know why that is? Because it's a state park, and they don't want that stuff around there. But we have to start thinking about people also. And so I modeled it after that and put it in there for overburdened communities. And they said, when they came to me in the community, they said, we don't feel like we have a voice. This is a multi-billion-dollar port authority. And I'm telling you, I support the port. But how can we fight them? We've just been getting stuff put on us and put on us. And I will say that we have a dredge facility where they put so many million cubic yards every year. And they said, we want to expand our footprint humongously. And our community said, you know what, we'll work with you. We'll support you. They said, we want to build the walls up to 60 feet high and make your backyards look bad. You know what, in the spirit of cooperation, we'll work with you. But when they came back with this, the community says, look, enough is enough. Stop doing this. Just because we don't have a big voice doesn't mean you can trample us. And that's when I came in, and they said, it's like a David versus Goliath. And I reminded them who won that battle. And I think as a state, we need to stand up and protect our most vulnerable who can't stand up for themselves. And just to give you a little background, the Newport Harbor just last year won a lawsuit, and they had to stop building their CAD. And the county council just this month said, we're going to come up with a reuse way of doing it. So they accomplished what they wanted, but they didn't have to build a CAD. Now remember, it's not CAD or bust. These are all kind of options. So they're looking for a 20-year projection. And so CAD is one of those 20-year projections to do that, but they're testing it now in these overburdened communities to see if it's feasible. There are other alternatives with reuse, and they can do that. And so with that, I'm going to just stop there and ask for your favorable consideration. So we'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Senator. As a sponsor, who would you like to designate? Do you have a sequence that, okay, then what you pick?
I don't want to get in trouble and pick one.
How about you take the mic and put it in front of somebody?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today before the committee. My name is Casey Hunter, and I'm here today on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland in support of Senate Bill 168. The League believes that advancing environmental justice is essential to creating an equitable and sustainable future for all Marylanders. And our overburdened and underserved communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color, are already disproportionately subject to environmental pollution and its associated health impacts, like higher rates of asthma, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. And this didn't happen just by chance. Historically, projects that pose potential risks to public health or safety tend to be placed in these overburdened and underserved communities who oftentimes lack the resources. They need to challenge the siting of projects like power plants and landfills, or in this case, confined aquatic disposal cells. And that's why the League is here today in support of SB 168, because it's a crucial step towards addressing the ongoing environmental injustices that Maryland's overburdened residents are experiencing. And this bill is not a blanket prohibition, like the senator said, on developing new CAD cells, but it's just a common sense measure to ensure that the burden of risk for this type of project does not continue to fall on Maryland's already overburdened and underserved communities. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify, and the League urges a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Hunter, I was supposed to put you on the 2.5-minute clock, but I am going to put the rest of the panelists on the 2.5-minute clock. So let's go down the aisle, and everybody's on the 2.5-minute timeline.
Thank you, committee members and Chair, for allowing me to speak today. My name is John Garofalo. I'm an Anne Arundel watershed steward and a retired federal scientist. I live in the beautiful peninsula community of Stony Beach and Anne Arundel Curtis Bay, which you can actually see in the picture in front of you, right in front of the power plants that we live next to. We in my 20 years in this community, I've been awed by the beauty of our waterways and the abundance of wildlife and community engagement in boating, kayaking, fishing, crabbing, all manner of water sports, and families joyfully swimming in our waterways. Unfortunately, we are surrounded by nearby pollution created by too many sources to list here. MDE advises us not to eat most seafood caught in the Patapsco because it is contaminated. We know that the river is struggling ecologically. Yet MPA is trying to make us agree with their clearly anti-environmental CAD plans. And CAD is likely worse for the environment than open water dredge dumping, which was outlawed in the Chesapeake Bay 25 years ago. MPA would not attempt CAD near wealthy, environmentally powerful communities. This kind of double standard rooted in demographics and pollution is the very definition of environmental injustice. Over the last year, a group of volunteer citizens, scientists, environmentalists, and conservationists came together to technically engage MPA. We presented our concerns to the MPA BWIG CAD subcommittee in an 86-slide presentation, including a survey we created, which showed that our waterway communities overwhelmingly oppose CAD by over 94%. Our citizen team found that MPA's CAD program fraught with technical risks. We understand the importance of shipping. As the Baltimore Harbor expands, the state must do its utmost to tread lightly on the Patapsco River and its overburdened residential communities. The existing pollution has had significant impacts to our health, employment, and businesses. The Patapsco is not a resource to be exploited, nor are its communities. We deeply appreciate this landmark environmental justice bill for the Patapsco and its communities. We ask you to please support SB 168. The river is not only a major hub for shipping, it is the lifeblood of our communities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You want to go middle?
I know it's late. I know you're weary. I know you're. My name is Dan Shearer. I'm a water resources analyst and a citizen of the state of Maryland concerned with public policy. Senate Bill 168 is about environmental justice. I support it because I believe in environmental justice. I also support the bill because it has an additional benefit, which I'll describe. CAD, as you know, is supposed to solve the problem of lack of disposal space for dredge material from Baltimore Harbor. I'll call that harbor material for short. This must be placed in a contained area called a DMCF. DMCF space is scarce. CAD is digging a hole in the bottom of the river at great expense, disposing of the material from the hole, which I'll call holding material, and then putting the harbor material that's been dredged from the harbor into the hole and cap the hole. And you have twice as much dredging to do that as you do to just put the material directly into the DMCF itself. In places where CAD has been successful, holding material generally has been cleaned and disposed of at sea. Highly toxic harbor material is buried, capped, net good. But this is not what is being proposed in the Patapsco. At the proposed Patapsco sites, the holy material is highly toxic, unholy, as it were. It has been identified as unsuitable for reuse. The material must be placed in a DMCF before the harbor material can be placed in the hole. No confining cap is proposed. The holy material or unholy material will require the same or more DMCF space as existing disposal methods. So this makes the problem worse. Costs substantially more. It requires twice the dredging, releases lots of toxic material into the water during the dredging. Perhaps some of the holy material can be reused. That would create some additional space, but at great financial, environmental, and social expense. It's likely that most of the holy material will stay in the DMCF. Please support Senate Bill. I have some more time. If CAD makes no sense to you now, welcome to the club. Support environmental justice, avoid costly and wasteful efforts, and economic and social disaster that CAD would provide.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Let's go down to the end of the table.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a policy analyst with the organization CASA, Maryland's largest immigrant advocacy and services org. Here today to thank Senator Simon-Ayer for his leadership on this bill and also to share why CASA urges a favorable report. For the first reason is that this bill gives the Department of Environment's critical data on the overburdened characteristics some teeth. It gives them the ability to act on it. Not only that, but this bill operates on the fact that overburdened communities need to be protected rather than a place where we continue to add these contaminated sites. I want to spend a little bit of time giving some specifics on this overburdened percentile, specifically in the region that Senator Simon-Ayer is sharing about. In the Curtis Bay area, specifically the zip code 21226, which has census tracts both in Baltimore City and in Anne Arundel in the Senator's district. These little census tracts are the ones that are in the top 99 percentile. And if you move around, you'll even see that the top census tract for overburden is in this area. The overburden score takes into account key indicators like proximity to hazardous waste sites, proximity to water discharge facilities, low birth weight amongst newborns, proximity to brownfields, and proximity to emitting power plants, which this area is full of. SB 168 operates on the idea that overburdened communities need to be remediated instead of being sites for contaminated sediment, waste, and just generally harmful sites. I also want to call attention to the fact that this bill is only talking about contaminated sediment and is only focused on these overburdened areas. The Curtis Bay area is completely surrounded by facilities that discharge into the harbor. The watershed was given the watershed around this area was given a D and an F in water quality by Blue Water Baltimore in 2023. If further dredging and the standard practice of putting CADs in close proximity to dredge sites were to occur, the likelihood of contaminated sediments from this area completely overburdened by wastewater treatment plants, stormwater runoff from the industrial area, and the decades of environmental degradation from the facility, we can count that the sediment will be toxic and will be contaminated. Dredging is done for the convenience of the port, but we can't continue to dump it in communities that already bear the brunt of pollution. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, which brings us to our final witness on the bill for the day.
Hi to Committee Chair Feldman and the committee. Thank you for allowing my testimony today. My name is Carl Treff, and I'm here today to testify in favor of SB 168 and the prohibition of confined aquatic disposal, otherwise known as CAD, near overburdened communities. As a lifelong resident of Pasadena on the shores of the Patapsco River, which is ground zero where CAD is intended by the Maryland Port Administration, I'm highly concerned about CAD's effects on residents, recreation, and river habitat. We are already faced with pollution from power plants, wastewater treatment plants, illegal incinerator dumping, and a decades-long pollution from Bethlehem Steel. It is well known that the Patapsco River is heavily industrialized. But at a certain point, the outer river morphs into a highly residential and recreational area. So despite what you might think, our river is alive. The outer part of our river is ringed with communities that enjoy their waterfront for boating, kayaking, tubing, fishing, crabbing, swimming, and even watching dolphins graze. There are public boat ramps, public parks, kids' sail camps, sailing regattas, just to name a few. So imagine digging a 90-foot deep hole equivalent in size to 15 football fields right in the middle of our river. Not only does the initial dig potentially stir up decades-old contaminants, but this 20-acre hole will destroy upwards of 160 million bottom-dwelling organisms, which are the beginning of the food chain. Once the initial hole is dug, the dredge spoils are then placed in it. So there's a double dip of muck going in and the muck coming out of the hole, and the extent of the drifting silt caused by that has yet to be addressed. Yet 2 restoration oyster reefs, decades in the making, sit only a mile or 2 away. Assuming MPA gets their foot in the door with this first CAD site, there are certainly plans to keep gouging more 20-acre holes in our river after that. As a resident, a recreationalist, and environmental steward of the Patapsco River, I cannot fathom in this era of bay restoration how mining and destroying the bottom of our river is a good idea. The MPA has yet to prove without a doubt that CAD is an environmentally safe alternative to land-based dredge storage. So I urge you to vote yes for SB 168 because our river is not Maryland Port Administration's landfill.
Okay, thank you, the entire panel, and we take questions. We'll start with the Vice Chair, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Simonaire, or I can probably to you, but if there's someone else instead. I'm noting in the testimony, and not trying to put anyone on the spot here, but in the testimony, the Department of the Environment submitted informational testimony. Environmental justice has been one of the sort of key lanes, key priorities for the administration, the Moore-Miller administration. I'm wondering if you tried working with them. Can you explain what their concerns might have been or why it is that they're not sitting right next to you and endorsing this bill?
Well, I would love to have them sitting here. The seats are nice and warm.
There you go.
I did reach out to them.
Yeah.
And I reached out to them about the definition of confined area. And I said, can we define this? And they said, well, we like the flexibility. We don't want to do that. They wouldn't support that type of legislation. So it's a little ironic of their testimony saying that contaminated sediment is not a defined term and subject to interpretation, because that's kind of what they wanted with confined area. But in the spirit of cooperation, I will amend that to be, instead of contamination sediment, be dredge material from Baltimore Harbor. Both those terms are defined, and I'm hoping they'll come back with a letter of support with that.
Could you keep us posted as to whether that happens and whether they change their position?
Sure, I'll reach
Thank
out.
you, Senator Simonaire. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Washington.
Thank you, Senator. I really like this bill.
Oh, we're seatmates.
Yeah, it seems like we've had some effect on each other. So there, I guess there's some section, is part of the code, right? And what it seems, an amendment or something, is that in each section of that portion of the bill, it gives the discretion of the department to essentially ignore the prohibition, right? So in the 5-1102, there's a section just on dumping prohibitions. And maybe some of the water keepers or someone will talk about the history of that, but it's just really clear that the redeposit of an unconfined matter and all that is just strictly prohibited. But then at each statement in the piece, in this section of law, it gives the department the discretion to approve an area to be deposited. So one, I think, if we move forward with this bill, we have to remove that discretion. It seems like that's there.
If I could just, before I get too
far. If I could ask you about that, yeah.
So you're absolutely correct. They say they can't have unconfined material go on the bottom of the Chesapeake Bay. But at the discretion of the department, they can put it in a confined location. So I said, that's why I approached the Department of Environment. I said, what is a confined area? Does that include CAD? Because at least know the rules, right? And that's what concerned me, was that they didn't want to define that. So we don't really know if CAD is or CAD isn't. So I specifically asked, does that include CAD? And they said, current policy is no, but we have the authority to do it because it falls under that broad confined for a confined aquatic. So I think their intention, and they probably can speak to it more, but a confined location would also mean something like Poplar Island that's confined or something like that, so.
Right. And Mr. Chair, just in general, that I think area that section is be worked on. Additionally, I just noticed in general that this part of the code really hasn't been reevaluated. It looks like since 2001 and all these standards. So absolutely redefining them. Have the water keepers or the advocates that support this bill, are there other things, I guess, we could do, since the governor, it looks like in 2000, had a report about plans for dredge material management. I mean, should we ask or make, in addition to this bill, specifically talk about how dredge material is being managed?
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion would be, let's keep it simple this year and pass it. And I would commit to work with you over the interim to come up with, working with the departments and revise this, because I think it's complex as far as what should be there and what shouldn't be there. But I am certainly on board with working with you and would support that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any additional questions? Seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 168, and that concludes our work for today.